At Passion Life, we commonly share a statistic that strikes most people as being very surprising. That statistic is that of all the abortion that takes place in our world each year, only about 3% of that worldwide annual abortion takes place in the United States. Now, that's a conservative figure, actually. That means that 97% of the world's abortions every year take place outside the United States, and we need, as North American Christians, to think of that 97% as a missions challenge. Now, I was talking with somebody recently who was making the case that Christians don't need to go out and do things for God. They don't need to go on mission. That's just a heap of rubbish. That's just things that we try to accomplish for God. What we need to do is know Him and worship Him and be in His presence. And that's the most important thing in the Christian walk. And I could not agree more. We need to be in God's presence and to know Him and to learn to worship Him, because we're going to do that forever. But if it's true that part of our existence is to not only know God, but to make Him known around the world, then it seems to me that it's helpful to take statistics and use them to help us help motivate how we prioritize the way we live our Christian ethic out among the people in our world. So today, I want to share with you a little bit about missions statistics in general. The statistics I'm going to be sharing come from a conglomeration of source materials like the Joshua Project, the travelingteam.org. You can find them online. The IMB statistics that are easy to find online. If you think about the world and all the peoples in it, you have to agree that God has a heart for all the peoples of the nations. You really can't read the Bible without coming to the conclusion that God is not the God of any one type or culture of people, but that He wants to be known. He wants to make His glories known among all the peoples, ta ethne in Greek, the peoples, the nations, the ethno-linguistic minority groups of the world. We see in Revelation people from every tribe, tongue, language, people group, and nation worshiping around the throne of the Lamb. And we realize that when Jesus said in Matthew 24:14, this gospel of the kingdom will be preached as a testimony among all nations, and then the end will come. Well, my interpretation of that, which may be different from some others, my interpretation of that is that God is watching as He uses His people to preach the gospel among the peoples of the earth, and that when the last of the elect that He has ordained to be brought in from among these different cultures and tribes and peoples comes in, then the end will come. Jesus will come back and bring us to the new heaven and the new earth. Missiologists define as best they can these ethno-linguistic minority groups around the planet to help us kind of prioritize how we're going to work. Most of them agree that there are somewhere north of 17,000, probably close to 17,500 groups of people in the world. That's people who, because of culture or ethnic identity or linguistic identity, consider themselves a group of people and everyone else in the world as them, they, outsiders. So you can't think of, for instance, you can't think of Colombia, South America, as a nation that God wants to reach. You have to think of Colombia as having hundreds of ethno-linguistic minority people groups living within those borders. You have to think not just of Spanish as being a language group. You have to think of all the minority people groups that speak Spanish within that umbrella who need to be reached with the gospel. Somewhere around 17,500 distinct people groups in the planet right now. Missiologists generally estimate that about 7,500 of those are yet to be reached with the gospel. So around 10,000 have been reached and 7,500 remain unreached. What do we mean by unreached? Unreached is generally agreed upon to mean that less than 2% of that population of peoples is evangelical Christian. If fewer than 2% of the people are Christians, they really don't have a good chance of reaching their own people group with the gospel. It's just too few, too underrepresented Once that people margin hits, the number of believers grows above 2%, then there's a good fighting chance that those people can share the gospel with their own people group. Outside of that, they need help from outside. So about 7,500 unreached people groups left on the planet. The bad news about that statistic is that the easiest ones had been reached. If it's true, as this man that I was having this conversation with earlier this week, if it's true that just being and being still and living where you are and not going out and doing anything for God, but just being with God where you are, if it's true that is God's call for all Christians and all Christians are obeying that call for their lives, then evidently God is calling 99.9995% of all Christians to live among the most evangelized people in the planet. And he is calling statistically zero, or more specifically 0.0005% of evangelical Christians to go somewhere to share the gospel with people who don't know him or are unreached with the gospel. Trying not to get too deep in the weeds here. I want you to be able to understand these statistics as they come out of my mouth. There are not a lot of missionaries among evangelical Christians living among unreached peoples in the world. It's rare enough that people decide to give themselves up to the service of God in full-time missions. But of all the people that do go from North America into full-time missions, for every 30 that give up their lives to become missionaries, only one in those 30 will go to an unreached people group. For instance, there's about one Christian missionary for every 400,000 Muslims on the planet today. Evidently, well, it sounds like to me we need more Christians to go as missionaries to our Islamic brothers and sisters to share the good news of Jesus among those peoples. Only one of every 210,000 people who becomes a Christian will become a missionary to the unreached. That literally means that you have a better chance of being struck by lightning than of becoming a missionary to unreached people in this world. Claude Hickman, I think, is the executive director of the traveling team. He says that there are more than 3,000 times the finances among Christians that would be needed to reach the world for Christ if you were to monetize church planting the way it has been and just kind of prorated out. We have more than 3,000 times the financial resources that we need to finish the Great Commission in our lifetime. We have more than 9,000 times the manpower that would be necessary to go out and reach those last 7,500 people groups with the gospel than we actually need. We just need to learn to prioritize and appropriate how we invest in missions better. Moving on just specifically to money. If you think about all the money that Christians make in the world, if you take all of the annual income of all the evangelical Christians on the planet, I want to say it's somewhere in the $800 trillion range. Claude Hickman also says, imagine a ballroom with a 50-foot ceiling, and you take the space between the ceiling and the floor to represent all of Christian income in the world, the amount of money that Christians make. You'd have to get down on your hands and knees and stack two bills end to end to represent the amount of money that Christians tithe off of that income. In other words, Christians do not tithe the 10% that the Bible indicates we should be tithing. In general, I think statistically we're giving somewhere around 1.5% of all Christian income goes to Christian causes. So in a room with 50-foot ceilings, you'd have to get down on your hands and knees, and from the floor to here would be how much people are tithing into Christian causes. Then you would have to say, well, how much of that tithe is going to reach the unreached people groups in the world? Well, to be able to measure that in a room with 50-foot ceilings, you'd have to take those same two bills and stack them on top of each other to find out how much of Christian income is going to reach the most unreached people with the gospel of Christ. About 0.5 millimeter of that 50-foot ceiling is going to reach the unreached. 94% of Christian giving in churches goes to basically to church ministry, local church ministry. 6% of what's given to churches goes into missions of some sort. The vast majority of that is local missions, feeding the poor and the hungry and doing food drives and things like that, and investing in Christian ministries within the community. I don't think that there's anything wrong at all with investing missions dollars locally, but of the 6% that goes into missions, 88% of those missions dollars will remain within 10 miles of the offering plate into which they were given. In other words, it's not making it very far around the globe. 1.7% of all Christian giving makes its way to the unreached peoples in the world. That's a bitter pill to swallow if you think that God, in some sense, has left us here to know him and to make him known. Then we have a lot of work to do. And that, again, does not burden me. That does not shame me. That does not make me feel oppressed by the numbers. It invigorates me. It challenges me. It makes me want to invest myself well and prioritize what I do well. At Passion Life, we are really aiming ourselves, our effort, our focus at the 3%, the 97% of abortions that are taking place outside the borders of the United States. And we feel good about honing our focus on that 97%. I think we are in 21 languages right now. We have 21 different languages posted on the PassionLife.org website, in which people around the world can go to find and download free resource materials to be able to teach their own people about the abortion rates within their country. That 21 languages that we have comprises somewhere around 52%, if my math is right, around 52% of the world's population can access Passion Life's materials for free and use them to talk about abortion from the Bible in their communities. We feel good about that. We want to expand that. We want there to be more resources in more languages. Of course, Mandarin Chinese accounts for about 18% of the world's population, so that was an easy one for us to translate into Mandarin Chinese and get disseminated out there. But with English and Spanish and some of these major languages that we've already translated our materials into, a lot of the people in the world can access our materials. Then we have minority groups as well, or at least small pockets of languages like Amharic in Ethiopia that can use our materials because we've translated them into that language. We've translated into Khmer, the Cambodian language, into Vietnamese and minority Vietnamese languages like Hmong. We have our materials for people like that. Perhaps these statistics motivate you the same way they do me. They make you say, hey, God, how can I invest my missions dollars well? How can I invest my pro-life dollars in a meaningful, strategic way? Well, one way that you can do that is to help us devise or translate more of our materials into foreign languages, majority language groups that can be used in larger and larger swaths of our planet. We have a vision for continuing on past 21 languages and into dozens and dozens and dozens of languages over the next few years. We need people like you to help us come in and do that. We need people like you to help us connect with people in minority language places and areas, with Christians who would invite us in to come work on the abortion statistics in the churches within those areas. Join us at Passion Life in this way. You can find us at PassionLife.org. We would love to count you among our many partners.